Hi, everybody. I'm Scott, and thanks for joining me again today for another episode of the Companion Podcast in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2. Today, it's story time, friends, so grab your cup of tea, your little blankies. You may want to get your jammies on and get ready to sit back and listen to another group of tales about the people, places, things, and events at the Evans Fur Company. And there's no better place to start than, as usual, with bringing everybody into the fold of the film we are currently producing, the second film in this docuseries. Here's a look at the trailer right now.
Julius and Rose Meltzer went forward with the belief that their son's death was an accident, and this setback rocked the family during a time when brother A.L. and Herman's Evans Furs was skyrocketing to the top of the industry.
Those Meltzer kids obviously weren't taught how to cope or how to parent or relationship skills were really lacking, and that got passed down.
All I know is that he had a photograph of him where he was brilliant, and the family loved him.
Yeah, I think she loved the way I looked, so she was always, like I was her little doll.
All of his grandchildren wrote reports on Nuremberg at some point in school. And someone would always have an assignment, interview some relative about something.
Nonchalantly would toss a question out, and the beads of sweat were pouring off as he's trying to answer Uncle Bernie's question.
A lot of people live in fear that, oh my God, is that going to happen to me?
In the end, a lot of people got hurt. A lot of customers got hurt. It was just a bad thing.
He's with his dinosaur, toy dinosaur on the table, and he says, you know what happened to these dinosaurs?
It was a very unique era.
Jeff and I got some calls, and people were just sobbing.
Well, they shut the doors on people. That was pretty high profile.
A fish has got to swim and an eagle's got to soar. That's their natural temperament and how they want to live and how they want to play. And when that's blocked, people are really unhappy.
So, as I said, today I've got a collection of stories. We're going to call it story time because there's no thread between them, but some of them are extremely heartwarming, including this first one from Diane Jones, our friend in sales on the third floor who ruled the roost down there. And she talks about part of what Evans equipped her with that allowed her to succeed.
I finished high school. I didn't have no college experience. So they sent me to college, and I stayed there for 2 years, and I finished a 2-year course down there. And then when I came back, they put me up in the factory, and they made me stay up in the factory like a month before I was able to actually come on the selling floor.
Yep.
It wasn't no joke. They wasn't no joke. So they taught me how to be strong as a woman, as a salesperson, because they wasn't no joke. They were serious about what they did. And it seemed like back in the days where Black people had to sit in the back of the bus, where I felt like I fought my way from the back of the bus to the front.
He had this fellow at Michigan Avenue, Mario Lloyd was his name. He always came in with small bills and bought a lot of stuff. It was like $75,000 worth of things. And well, you knew he wasn't like a doctor or a stockbroker or anything like that. A couple of months later, he stopped by. I was called by the district attorney to testify against him in court, and his defense attorney was F. Lee Bailey.
Oh, whoa.
Okay, and I just Googled him. He had a life sentence, and he just got out after 35 years. Yeah.
Whoa.
So,
wow.
This is like, I don't know how this came to you, but it did.
Business wasn't great at all those years.
So you're looking for other avenues.
Found the way to sell the magazines, and not just the the movie stars who said, that's why they have storage even. Because, 30 years ago, if you got 30 years ago, 60 years ago, who bought mink coats? Like movie stars. And that's why they were $10,000 then. That's why they have storage, because you had to keep it with such a precious thing. Now, if somebody has a mink coat, they put it, save the money, put it in your closet, it's fine. Although I get called, not every day, but often. Say, let me ask you a question. And you know what the question is? I have a mink coat. The skins are beautiful. I bought it, in New York. It's gorgeous, but I never wear it. What should I do with it? And I tell them, nothing. If you don't remodel it, don't spend one more penny, you're not going to wear it anymore. It had a good life. If you can sell it like in a thrift shop or something, although, now the vintage, you see that? This just started up. The kids are buying old. Look at this. Look.
This is a little before your time.
Oh, my.
Well, the Afghan coat, the coats they made in Afghanistan.
I would see those for storage.
I just made these. I make this in China.
Wow.
And I think it'll sell. I think this will be good. Anyway, the kids are wearing, because it's okay, because they didn't kill any more animals to make these coats. And so they wear it all. I see it on the street, these crappy old, all kinds of things, but it's the fashion to wear these old furs.
And one of the things we went up with David Meltzer, he said, Mr. Meltzer, it's time to sue the animal activists and sue CNN. Because if you remember, CNN was pushing the fake narrative that coats were getting spray painted. There was a commentator, Jenny Moose, kept promoting that coats were getting spray painted. And really back now we know it's called fake news.
Yep.
We were as an industry getting canceled and it was really fake news. And David's response, I'll always remember his response was, guys, this will blow over. It always does. We don't need to sue them. It'll only make things worse. And looking back, I think that was the wrong approach. And that was his approach to animal rights. And I think we paid dearly for that because we never really straightened out our side of the story. Everyone thought it was going to go away. And it did not, obviously.
Okay. We were young. I don't know if you want to say innocent. We were certainly immature. And we all had things to learn in various arenas of life just to help us get through the day. Case in point, Jim Lietz, fur buyer, trying to make coffee.
Well, right, that gives me another quick story with Jimmy, because he'd always tried to intimidate people with his size and that. Well, one day he said something to me, and it was after work. We're walking out to go home on the third floor, and I just got up underneath him and picked his ass up and carried him to the elevator. And it just shocked the shit out of him that somebody my size could move his ass. And he was like, wait, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, evidently I can, so don't pull that shit. Well, every night I was low man on the totem pole. So I would go, there wasn't water in the back offices. So I'd go and get water for the coffee pot, have the grounds all set. So all you had to do was pour the water in because the coffee pot was old. It'd leak out if you did it the night before. So, and then you hit the button, right? Well, I came in one morning. I was late, dentist appointment or something, one of the few times. And I come in and the coffee just finishes percolating, brewing. And I'm like, what the hell? There's only half a pot. And Jimmy goes, yeah, I had to take the water out so there'd be room for coffee. I'm looking at him like, is he serious? So I'm looking around like he already took a cup, I'm like, I would have. No. He had never made coffee.
I was in Fresno. I think it was Gottschalk's was the store, helping out at one of the first sales that we had. We would have these weekend warehouse sales. And so I was helping out at one of the sales, and it would take a day to set the thing up. And then you have the sale for 2.5 days. And then it takes a day to break it down. And so during the sale, I'm helping to sell. And my turn comes to take the next potential client that comes into the room. And it's this man and a woman, his wife, in their 50s, I'd say. He's wearing overalls with dirt all over the overalls. And when I say filthy and looked like he'd just gotten off of tending to his farm, I mean, you could pretty much smell the manure coming off of him. And I'm saying to myself, oh my God, this is going to be a fucking waste of my time. And I don't know what, when I think about it now, it's like, what am I so anxious about? Where am I in such a hurry to go? I'm in Fresno. It's not like there's anything to do. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do at night. And he turns to her. I'll never forget this. He turns to her and he says, get whatever you want, but keep it under 50. And, I'm young. I'm still a young guy at this time and learning and everything, but I'd sold my fair share of coats over 10,000 and a few over 20,000. And I remember by then I'd had one sable sale for 50 or 60,000, a lower end sable. And so I start working with the woman, and halfway through, I think I started to sense that they were serious. And so I took the thing a little more seriously, finding her the right coats, getting the things to fit right, treating it like I might have a huge sale on my hands there. And at the end of the day, they spent $48,000. And that was the day I learned my lesson in sales about don't judge a book by its cover.
No, I just, during the executive training program, I remember this. I really tried to learn all the people in the company, and that is part of an interest that I have. And that was part of the beauty of Evans. But the mink cutter, Izzy, he was very quiet, and he was the mink cutter, and then the fun fur cutter, so fox, beaver, that was Israel. Israel was, thin, smaller. I don't know if you remember him. And then Henry Wald was in the. He was the skin guy.
He was the matcher.
He was the matcher and the skin guy. And he started out with Henry Wald, and then he went over. And I remember Henry and Mr. Geller saying to me, now, beware of Izzy, because he's not very friendly to trainees, and that he won't talk with you and whatever. Just leave him alone, watch him, let him explain what he did. And I don't know what it was, but I formed a relationship with Izzy, a professional one. And we sat and we talked, and he told me the story of he was a survivor, and he was in a Polish during the Holocaust, was in a camp and was taken from his family. He did not talk about his family other than his brother. He said, he and my brother, he told me the story that they worked. It was in a work camp, and he said, and I was very big and very strong, so I was kept to work. And my brother, after being there, I don't remember all the details, but he was there maybe 5 or 6 months, and his brother, they were on their way to work, and his brother stumbled, and he was very afraid because they were being marched with all the armed guards and so forth. And he picked his brother up, and he said, I held my brother because he was too weak from starvation. He was too weak to walk. And the guard came over and shot him right in the head, right in his arms. To this day in my life, I will never forget that story. And I remember asking him, Izzy, how do you go on? And he just said, he said, I'm here. And I remember he said, I have a nice wife and a nice house. He said, I sit outside and feed the ducks and I just go on. And I just wanted to share that story because that is something that I have carried with me since the day I've heard it. And I think there's stories that need to be told if they're shared with you.
And that goes back to what I was talking about previously about Evans. They were actually really good about helping people, trying to stand by him and that. And I know you'd mentioned that, and so had Larry on several different occasions. But this was just from a pure humanitarian standpoint. How to help? How do you help somebody? I mean, that's gone through that.
I remember going to Mr. Geller and telling Mr. Geller, I said, Mr. Geller, I just had the most amazing experience to me. Now I'm a 21-year-old kid at this time, hearing this, and he looked at me and he said, he told you that? I don't even think Geller knew. Whatever it was that day. Anyway, I just wanted to share that because it meant a lot to me.
Pretty much, you take it, stay out of my office. This is my division. I'm your boss. He made that very clear.
So how much did you do doing this operation?
So my goal was 750,000. So, it's a company car, me and a secretary.
Oh, you had a secretary?
I did.
Oh,
I
wow.
actually hired my ex-wife now.
Okay.
Because she showed up in Boston the one day and followed me there because, I thought I was moving away and starting over. She showed up and, she kind of needed a job. So she sat in the office for like 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then said, I don't want to do this anymore. And then I had another lady who, did all the paperwork. I
Okay,
ran
awesome,
stores. I did 26,000 miles in 5 months.
Wow. That's a lot of driving.
Yeah, so I just rotated.
So how much did you do on the $700,000 goal?
The 750 goal, I ended up doing 1.5 million.
Wow. Okay,
So,
how come?
Because
what went right? Aside from the fact that you're good, what went right? Like, what did you figure out as you were doing it that you fed upon?
It was just time and putting the time into it. Bottom line is you keep stuff merchandise and available, it's going to sell. You can't say, hey, come back in a few days, I'm going to have your size for you because, fur was somewhat of an impulse buy.
I never liked when the prices were on things. That was later on. I much prefer making up my own price.
Well, and you wanted to control the process, right?
Exactly right. And when I was at Yorktown, John Sarama hated me. Actually, he hated everybody.
He hated me too, buddy.
I'm at Yorktown, and I had my own little business going, and some really great things came in, and I naturally marked them higher than they were supposed to be, and I sold them, and they found out, and it was like, well, hell broke loose. But Pat Regan was on my side because he used to come there with his cronies, and I would sell them, or I'd go to their houses and sell them things. So it was like, that was no good for me. I wanted to make my own prices and get a higher markup. Although I wouldn't mind giving things away when necessary too. So,
but it's all those little touches. Going to their houses and spending a half hour talking to them before you even show them a coat, and then you decide what you're going to show them, and et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly right. Yes, it was like at Marshall Field on Michigan Avenue, which is no longer there. We were in a little corner, doing no business at all. And then someone's idea to put us on the mezzanine. Are you familiar with that store?
Oh, yeah. I can't believe that store's not there anymore.
Yeah. And the mezzanine, you had to walk it through to get to anything, to take the escalator, to get to the food court, to get to anything. So they were doing $900,000 there. Mary, whatever her name was. And then I got there, And we did $3 million the first year because you're on the mezzanine. So here I was getting in trouble again, for marking the things at different prices, but I could still sell. Then they did fire me in the end.
But then also, as I recall, you used to get in trouble all the time. Forget about marking up. You used to get in trouble for marking down and the cost markdowns.
I did that too. I couldn't let anybody leave. If somebody wanted to buy a coat, they were going to leave with it, no matter what price. I had to make the sale. I was driven. If I didn't make the sale, I would fail. Now, the fact that it was $10 over cost, it didn't matter to me.
Right.
I just had to make the sale.
Some introductions are better just left unsaid.
Oh, and I can't remember all the details. Maybe somebody else does. So it was a Belk's assistant doing bridge furs. And I can't remember the woman who was in charge of Belk's at the time, but we had a hotel sale in Columbia, South Carolina, one weekend when I was in Macy's in Atlanta. So I was there with Robert McLaughlin, and we get a phone call, and it's the manager, and I can't remember her name, Susan something. And so in any case, she goes, I really need help. Can one of you come and help me? And I'm like, well, all right, we're almost done here. It's 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. All right. Where do you want us to meet you? And she gave me, she goes, yeah, I need you to meet me at this police station. I'm like, oh, shit. So we get there, and we have to put bail up for whoever it was. I can't remember his name. And he comes out, and he's standing there in a pair of chaps. And that's it. No shoes, no socks, nothing else. I'm like, he had been out partying all day.
Sounds like
it. Got arrested. I think it started the night before is what I'm thinking. And he just was partying all night next day. And then somebody threw him out, and he was wandering the streets because he was wasted, as best I could put together. But that one never made it into the employee handbook. So I ran across, there was not a party store, but I just went and got, it wasn't even a tracksuit, it was just a pair of pants. And I'm like, put these on, will you? I didn't care if it was a skirt, I don't think it would have mattered to him at that point.
We'll be able to, everybody will see this article. And for people that don't know what we're talking about here, the Sandy Reports, which is still the fur industry newsletter, is doing a big skin on skin feature on Monday. Here's how it looks and everything. Okay, so we did that.
Is Sandy Parker is it still viable business?
Well, when Sandy Parker passed away, that sounds like a riddle. What is it? Like Peter, but when Sandy Parker passed away, Sandy Bly bought it. Sandy Bly took over.
Is she related to him or anything, or what was there a connection?
Only by first name.
Okay.
So she changed it to Sandy.
Yeah.
And which is perfect. And Sandy Bly is always had her finger on the pulse of the fur industry.
And what did she do?
Well, she was always in the heart of working with the different as far as I know, right, Jimmy?
Yes.
Like working with FICA, working with for New York. She was like, I'll call it, she was like the PR person for the fur industry.
Yes. And at one time, she even worked for BC as a PR person for a while, I think.
Exclusively for Chris?
Yes.
Yeah,
But
I say, she was everywhere in the fur industry.
Yes, and she was very good friends with Howard Hinden and Alan Seifer.
So do we have any idea, Larry, how much distribution she has at this stage? Like you said, all 6 of them, like how many people? But I imagine there's still hundreds of people internationally getting this.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, it's enough of how can I say? It's got to be enough of a distribution that Sandy makes time for it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I mean, again, we're all in this for passion, but she's a much smarter woman.
Now is
money and passion much smarter.
Larry?
Well, yeah, like I say, I mean, I'm certain that it's there's enough following that she keeps everybody in contact.
We had backbiting back, so I didn't really have the buying stuff and everything was still fine, but to running that without the support and backing, really of David was going nowhere. I was only there for about 3 years. Also, I lived in New York. When they moved me to New York, I bought a house. I owned a house in Glencoe. You know Glencoe? You live in Chicago. Anyway, I bought a house, and they moved me to New York. I sold that house. I bought a house in New York for a little more, for like $100,000. I was in New York for 10 years. I sold it that was the real boom time. I sold it for like $1.2 million or something like that. When they moved me back to Chicago, I bought a house on Lake Michigan in Highland Park. I had a good budget. I didn't even need a mortgage. I had maybe I had a little mortgage. I had $1 million to spend in Chicago at that time. And I'm thinking, I don't want to, it's better to keep it like really low. My wife said, my first wife said, we shouldn't live here or here. I said, well, this is not only, I have a house on the lake with our own beach. Come on. Was not smart. And I didn't want everybody to know that because it was pretty ostentatious. It was needed work and stuff, but it was a house on the lake.
Nice.
So I didn't want it to be like flaunt it in everybody's face. And about 2 months after I lived there, the cover of the Tribune magazine showed, what do you get for $1 million? What kind of house do you get for $1 million in Chicago or in Ireland? And there was me and my house on the cover. That hurt me. I think that pissed. Nobody ever said anything, but I think for sure that pissed off everybody. And I get it. I understand.
Evans was a family-run company, and it was a family company. People who worked there, employees, felt like family, were treated like family. Many of them brought family into the company. But there was a line, and Jane Whaling Witt reminds us that you are family, but you're not family.
I think about that because for all of you, it was very different because we were not family. And I wouldn't, like we were family, but not family. It was a family-run company, and I never felt bad about it. It was just accepted. Because I remember talking with my father, telling him about my job and everything. And he was like, well, you're not a family member. So, just remember that. Always remember that, he would say. Just don't get mad. He said, just always remember that. And I thought, okay. So, I don't know. I think about that now.
When I would show up for a hotel event in a city and some guy would show up and say, oh, you don't have a license. And I go, okay. You go, we're going to fine you. I go, okay, what's the fine? $100. Okay, I do $100,000 worth of business. I'm like, who gives a fuck?
Right, it's a cost of doing business.
Right, and I think when Fur became outlawed, and I'll be honest, I'd very much like to do a hotel event in a year and a half there, as I envision things.
I bet you a pent-up demand.
People are eager to buy when it might be a little wrong. And what are they going to do? They can't shut you down. You got to know the bylaws, right? Like, okay, you're selling fur, we're going to have to fine you or warn you or something. But you're not going to shut me down when I'm at the Beverly, Wilshire or someplace, right? People are going to.
Yes, they will.
The people with the illegal weed stores get away with it for months and months and months.
Exactly.
So.
That's what I keep saying.
No, but they would shut you down in L.A.
What are they going to send the police?
Yes.
No way. I guarantee you. I would do a test.
That's not happening.
I did well, actually, it was because of picketers that, there were people picketing a sale that I did outside of the store. I called it a sale so big we couldn't accommodate it. We couldn't accommodate it in the store. So I went to a small hotel room. No,
I
but
had a lady get chased by a picketer once. I called the police. The cops were there. I said, "Did you fucking see this? The guy's assaulting the woman." I was, "What do you want me to do?" I'm like, "Do something." This is, if it was a black guy jumping on a white girl, you'd have been all over the poor fucker.
that's true. That is true.
So we also have to show some.
All right, wait. So I got to ask you a question. You got two guys, Scott and I, and Jimmy. Jimmy also. We would do events like the Evans did events. We did the Drake Hotel. We did $1 million in a day.
Oh, those were
We
different
did
days.
Los
Beverly
Angeles,
Hilton.
the Beverly Hilton.
Yeah.
We did millions of dollars in a weekend. If that sale was run today in Los Angeles, you could support the merchandise because we had thousands of furs. Do you think that you could do millions of dollars in a 2-day event?
Millions, but I think you could do 300,000 or 400,000.
I think the Beverly Hilton charged us that.
And it was worth every
That was
penny
because
back
you had
then,
an
so.
executive.
Well, if you're doing $2 million, it is.
No, listen, I'm telling you, we're doing a hotel event. We do hotel events. It's a big part of our business. We go to, you guys know Potomac in DC. Find a nice hotel. 200 grand in 3 days. No problem. The hotel costs you 10 grand, advertising 20 grand. You're making big money.
Well, that was my business at Dicker and Dicker of Beverly Hills for the first couple of years.
Right.
I had no brick and mortar. It was all trunk shows and caravans.
So that can still happen. It still happens. And I tell you why it works better. Customers don't like coming to a store, a fur store. We're still intimidated.
Yeah. And a lot of them don't want others to see them walking in.
Okay, maybe walking in, but
I used to hear this from all the time when a customer would say, when like one of their friends would be there and say, "Well, what are you going to say when somebody says you had to kill those animals?" This is not real.
That's more California problem, I think.
Yes.
Okay. So I think what happens is the ladies like coming. We own Garden House in DC, which is one of the oldest brands, right?
Yeah.
We run a Garden House hotel sale. Ladies come, sit down to pay for it, and they go, "Do you have a store?" We're like, "No, we're Garden House. We're on fucking in Bethesda." "Oh, yeah? I didn't know who's having the sale. I just came because I saw there's a fur sale. I don't want to buy something." So I think, the perception of fur, I wanted to make that point earlier, Scott. When a lady used to buy a fur coat, when I first started selling family and fur coat, the husband would come with the woman. They'd make a purchase decision, maybe that day, maybe tomorrow. And it would be a big milestone, buying a mink coat.
Yep.
Okay. Now, and what kind of mink? Is it female? Is it male? Is it American? Is it Black Llama? Now a woman comes in. I'm still work the sales floor. She just comes in. "What's this?" "Mink." "Oh, mink. Oh, I like it." Done. Doesn't ask. Is it female? Is it male?
The whole diamond thing is gone.
Well, right. The luxury aspect of fur is gone.
That's why I think chinchilla and sable and all that stuff, it stands out from the rest.
You don't have to know anything to see that it's nicer than everything else.
Right. But there's none of this, and customers used to ask us, I'm sure everybody knows, how long is this going to last?
Yeah.
Now they're like, I don't give a fuck. I like it today. And even Yves Saint Laurent was all shearling for a couple of years. Now they're showing mink again. So there must be something going on.
The only thing that I could offer Gibson was to send it off to Chicago and let them make the decision.
the real fur looks so much different on film than the fake shit, but you're starting to see them go back to it.
Refused to say he was a feathered pillow.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a common.
Goes back to how focused he was. He knew what he wanted, and he usually got it.
I need this. I need this. I got an ad coming up. What do you think? I'm a magician?
And I want you to take a lie detector. I go, I'll meet with you at the mall where all the people are.
That was my first shot at running a business. It was great. I made, like everyone else, you make mistakes. You see the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I send you this note, which I believe is timely, the result of 53 years of experience in the retail business.
People were diversifying like crazy. Jeff was begging David to diversify. He used to always come to him with business ideas.
We should diversify into completely different industries.
He said, well, will you stay on as a consultant? And my dad said, sure, I'd consider that.
At the same, the Melfs really didn't run it anymore. They really didn't know the fur business.
We're covering a lot of sentimentality in years, because this movie, I'll say the hardest thing about this movie, which I dig, is the depth.
Truly, I've been through hell for the last 5 years. My heart broken when I had to give up my lovely home in New Rochelle.
We used to laugh at remodels back in the 80s. We didn't have time for remodels. Now that's what we do. What I have done is I've got the trappers involved, and they're very helpful because you need an army of people.
I had to set up a meeting with the lenders, and it brought Bill Koziel, David, Ernie Wish, and myself. And I put on an act.
That was a destiny they created.
And then the vendor would say, could I see you and David and Robert in the back, please?
I think we're learning 30 some odd years later that Brian Witt was one of the main pranksters back at Evans. A lot of these secrets either people didn't know about or haven't been told for decades, and they're just finding out about these things now. Larry Becker, do you know about this even?
We were still on the third floor working, and Charday tape came out. And Larry loved it, and Sylvia had gotten it for him for his birthday or something. And this was when the Walkman was the big thing. Well, Larry used to take the Hooterville Express out to Naperville, and he would buy his 2 beers, put his Charday tape on, and kind of go into La La Land after having his beers, just chilling. Well, I went out and bought another Charday tape, and about 20 minutes in, I started Oldford's Tubular Bells. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that. Well, all of a sudden, he's sitting there on the train, and he's hearing The Exorcist. And he had 2 beers, and maybe he had something else. I don't know, but the next day, he's like, you won't believe what happened. So I would mess with those guys that way. Usually, harmless, but you got to have fun with who you're working with.
I'll tell you, I was sorry to see Bobby go. And actually, I was sorry to see David go. And I know you say he was so terrible to the family, but he was so nice to the employees. The day I started there, I met him on the sales floor on the 3rd floor. And he never, he always knew my name. He was so good with names. I don't know how he did it, but he was so good. And he was so nice to you. So nice to me. Always, with the years. In fact, in the night in 1979, before they moved me to Seattle, I was looking for a condo, and I found one at 2400 Lakeview. And the mortgage rates were so high at the time. And David was getting me a mortgage from his friend at Uptown Bank. It was like, he was just so nice to everybody. Of course, when they moved me and I didn't get the mortgage, I embarrassed him and he didn't talk to me for 2 years. And then everything was fine after that. So, yeah, very nice. The fact that David Meltzer always knew who you were was really such a very, very nice thing. Yeah.
Well, I was in Chicago and I was helping out. We'd gotten a large shipment in at Hillside, and the Orient was coming in, New York was coming in. So we were doing basically a show out at the Hillside just for the merchandising people, not for any of the stores. So Larry comes walking in and they're unboxing, they're there and they're unboxing coats and they're putting them on hangers. And there's this one kid, he picks up a beautiful mink coat, goes to put it on the hanger, it falls on the ground. He picks it up again, he goes to put it on the hanger, falls down again. This goes on for like 4 times. And Larry, he yells across the floor, "What? Are you a fucking retard?" At that point, when everybody just got quiet and Larry started looking around at the people, and I'm like, "Larry, we have an agreement through John Ceramo with the Association for Retarded Citizens, otherwise known as the ARC." Yeah. So, yes, he wanted to go crawl under a rack and hide.
I know amongst the directors of the company, of which my grandfather was one, there were a number of thoughts on the direction that the company should have been taking as things got tough in terms of fur and non-fur products, and whether or not the fur business should be the focus of the company and separated from the apparel business. And so there was always something on the burner for David Meltzer, something that would occupy his time in terms of family members, in terms of he was forever putting out a fire somewhere, a trauma within the family, a trauma within the company's situation as it started going downhill. And it was just a difficult time. Look, being a leader, being the CEO, it's not an easy lifestyle. And I'm sure it's not an easy place to be. There's no decisions that's the one right decision that you can make. In fact, there's nothing clear cut most of the time. There's no 100% decision. In fact, if everything was clear cut, what would we need a CEO for? In fact, if you ask people in the know, like the board members and other big financial people, a good CEO, if he gets 50% of the decisions right, he's a genius.
But too many factors were impacting the industry in general, and Evans Furs in particular, for those efforts to matter. Oh, that was horrible. But too many factors were impacting the industry in general, and Evans Furs in particular, for those efforts to that matter. That was horrible. Try it again. But too many factors were impacting the industry in general, and Evans Furs in particular, for those efforts. This is a fucking weird sentence, Scott. But too many factors were impacting the industry in general, and Evans Furs in particular, for those efforts to matter. But too many factors were impacting the industry in general, and Evans Furs in particular, for those efforts to matter. But too many factors were impacting the industry in general, and Evans Furs in particular, for those efforts to matter. Let me do that one more time because I'm starting to like this thing. But too many factors were impacting the industry in general, and Evans Furs in particular, for those efforts to matter. But too many factors were impacting the industry in general, and Evans Furs in particular, for those efforts to matter. The animal rights effort was growing. Culture was changing and getting much more casual, requiring less dressy items such as fur coats and, as we've discussed, that Meltzer family culture that permeated everywhere and was felt whether you were an actual family member or not. Okay. Fucking typos, dude. Fucking typos. The animal rights effort was growing. Culture was changing and getting much more casual, requiring less dressy items such as fur coats.
You know, at the Evans Fur Company, we came from all walks of life, all shapes and sizes, all colors, all religions, all financial backgrounds, and we were thrown into this melting pot together to achieve a cause that was success for the company and success for ourselves personally. And we truly became a family to the point where we supported each other both in good times and bad. Sometimes lessons were learned at both.
Debbie Nim's brother. Do you remember Debbie?
Sure, yep.
Well, their mom died. And I'm like, Jimmy, you work with this guy 40 hours a week. You got to go to his mom's funeral. You've been doing this for how many years? And you know Debbie for that. So Murphy, and I went down to the funeral. And it was down the Southside, some church, whatever. And, it was what it was. And Jimmy was he was breaking out in a sweat. And he was so nervous. You know how he always did this with his tie and his shirt. And it was the funniest thing because Debbie just looks at him. She goes, wow, talk about a fish out of water. She goes, nobody's going to kill you here, Jimmy. When you walk out of the church, maybe, but not in here. Relax.
Very much so. She's called it the way she saw it. But she was one of those people, like, I would say maybe in the same description as a Frank Riccio. She could be gruff and she could be direct and blunt. But if you needed her help with something and you just approached her in the right way, and if she liked you, she would give her left arm for you. I mean, this is how she was very much that way, but she didn't tolerate fools. I would say that about Pat Murphy. She did not tolerate fools. But she had a great sense of fun, very funny sense of humor.
A lot of people don't realize Murphy came from a lot of money. Like, she'd fly into New York and then Daddy would helicopter out to the house on the shore.
Oh.
Yeah. But she was never pretentious about it. She, not that she never.
No, but you know what? That also explains why, she didn't ever seem like impressed by the Meltzer thing and all the money. So that makes total sense now, right?
Yeah.
Nope. She was her own person. Mr. Geller loved her. Teddy G loved her. She used to call him Teddy G. Oh, here comes, I can still hear her saying, here comes Teddy G. Coming around the corner to talk with us. I can hear her.
Yeah. And we would gotten killed if we called him Teddy.
Anyway, I think when she first joined Evans, she worked for Mr. Geller. I think she did. But, we maintained a friendship for 40 years and we spoke every day. Murphy hated children. Brandon and I have 3 children. She said, I can talk to you, just don't talk to me about those urchins. She would say, I don't want to hear anything about them. And but as the boys grew up, she wanted to know everything that was going on with them. So it was, a lot of it for her was gruff. It just was gruff.
So was she ever with you and the kids?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So how was she around them?
So I remember we visited. She was living in we had Christopher and Andrew, and they were in toddlers at that time, and we took them out of
Sturgeon Bay.
We went to see them in Sturgeon Bay when they had that the house, the
B&B,
the bed and breakfast place. That the only reason she bought the house is she wanted to redo an old house. So it lasted 1 season, I think, for them to have the rentals, and she said, "I'm out." She hated people. I remember walking in with the boys and she said, please tell me I don't have to touch one of them. I said, no. But in the meantime, she had toys there for them. You know what I mean? But this was her way. It was it was like she was testing you and you just had to put up with the test. But she could deliver a blow if she was pissed about something, though. That is for sure.
Oh, yeah. She'd get mad at me a lot.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She would say, Brian has that, I can still hear her say, did he disappear on you again? Do you know where he went? Did he just do one of those Brian things and then leave? Anyway, she was another thing about Murphy I can tell you is, and I touched on it another time, but she was a beautiful seamstress. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about tailoring. I'm talking about the understanding of garments. She did a little, she learned that growing up from her grandmother, actually. And she actually had fiber. She went to Iowa State, and I think her degree was in fashion.
Fabric fiber.
It was fabric, fiber, and fashion or something. It was something on.
Great degree. Holy cow.
Yep. Yep.
So when you're talking about the level of competency she had, she was working for a designer called Celeste.
Yeah.
And they were doing some opera singer's place up in Door County. The fabric was $30,000 for the bedding.
Oh, yeah. I'll have to tell that.
Yeah.
Let me tell that story because, all right. So, because we work together, I have an interior design business, and that's how I've been earning my living. And she did all my home deck sewing, but I used to help her because and I have a good business, but she had her one other client, Celeste Wegman, had a really top echelon group of clients. So I used to fly there and help her during some of these large installations. And this house was probably a $10 million home. And Murphy did every bit of sewing inside of it, all custom beds, 6 bedrooms. I mean, Murphy did everything. And one of these fabrics was some sort of very expensive. At net, it was $500 a yard. And it was more than 30 because she had 30 yards of it. And she had to cut this stuff. And I remember saying, Murphy, what are you going to do? She said, oh, fuck it. She said, there's more at the store. And away she went and cut it. She just was not intimidated by intimidated. She just was not intimidated.
It just didn't get handed down. By the time the next generation came along, they were born into some wealth and some success and some achievement. And so the natural things that come with that took over. The search for more power, a little bit of greed. As I've said, some passive aggressiveness comes into play. But the important part is that sense of togetherness started to unravel a little bit. There was dissension amongst the ranks in the Meltzer family. And I think that the race was more on for everyone and anyone who was associated with Evans Furs to sort of stake out their own little corner of the world that they could call their own. In fact, I can admit now that I mean, in LA and San Francisco, and even when they brought me back to Chicago, I was trying to do that.
And, you can't save the business just by firing people. So they fired me. Here's what I think about that. I couldn't believe they fired me. I was like the business was bad. I don't think I was really contributing all that much. I told for the reasons I explained, but I was really surprised.
Are we buying less merchandise at this point? Is it going down, or we're still buying massive quantities? Or
well, we bought big quantities, even when there was, if there was 10% less business, that hurt your bottom. You lost money, but you were still buying $40 million worth of furs a year.
So that's what doesn't make sense about it, because you were the one that had all the knowledge of that, and that was something that was still terribly needed. Yet we're going to do without it because your salary is a little bit higher.
Should have stayed. It would have been better. Of course, what it is. This happened. What if that happened? But as business, so I was shocked when they fired me. I was surprised. I'll say that. And what hurt me at the time is Bob Periga fired me. Neither David nor Bobby had the balls. I say, all right, at least man up here, fellas. So that was showed a real show of no character after all the years and everything. But all right.
So now, when you were in New York, you may or may not remember, but in the 7th Avenue building, there was a coffee machine in the lobby.
No, I do not remember that.
Well, that's because
there was all those delis within a half a block.
You got yours from the Greeks, right? The little cup. Well, Jimmy, no. He was too cheap. He was going to get his from the machine. So every time I saw him coming down, I would wait. And right before he came in, I'd run to the machine and get a chicken soup. So he would be the next one in line and he'd get a coffee. And his coffee tasted like chicken soup every day.
Does he know this?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yes, now.
We did have fun. Yes, I was an ass to him at times, but we had fun.
Okay, so Eddie Jonas's dad, who literally became, I mean, my father, we lived in the same development. When I first moved to Chicago, we lived in Arlington Heights. Okay. I mean, I moved to my father's apartment. I didn't spend much time. I mean, my father was remarried. He had 2 little kids, and it just wasn't, I was 18 years old, and he had, like a 12 and a 10-year-old, stepchild. And it just wasn't the place where I wanted to be. So, I mean, I made my sojourn out of there very quickly. But during the couple of months that I did live there, Lenny Jonas, Eddie's dad, who was the manager at the Woodfield store. Lenny was a neighbor.
And this was when? 77, 78-ish, somewhere in there?
It was 1970. It was 77 when I moved there.
Okay.
But the key is, my dad was sort of friendly with him. And we would see each other. My first mission was in Chicago, working in downtown Chicago. But it was like 4 months later that they send me to Woodfield.
Is this before you went to Merrillville?
This is way before. This is in the beginning when I first
got there.
When I first got to Chicago, Anyway, to make a long story short, I was asked to go and be the vault boy in Woodfield. And I mean, it was, to me, an 18-year-old kid, I thought to myself, I didn't have the mindset of thinking it's cool because I don't have to travel 3 hours a day and, I'll be at home with my friends to enjoy my time. After all, I'm 18 years old. And I didn't realize that in Chicago, although I was locked in a room, on the 5th floor, everything was happening out of Chicago. So as long as your eyes were open, you were a part of it. And again, well, exactly. However, I was blessed because I got a guy like Lenny Jonas that took me under his wing. And Lenny, much like the story that you tell about my dad, basically telling you express yourself, but listen to what's going on around you because these people know. Lenny was one of those people too. And I mean, to me, he was the master of retailing because I saw him do things that were like so weird. We would be getting ready for a sale. And I would, as the vault boy, I mean, I'm bringing out all the coats and I'm making sure everything's locked up and I'm making sure every hanger is, in order and everything is ready for us to serve these people. And Lenny would come and he would move stuff around and like shake things up. And I was like, Lenny, I just fixed that. I mean, I just made it look presentable. I said, we haven't even had a customer in yet. He goes, I want that first customer to think that there have been other customers in and they got it grabbed now. And you know what? I watched it happen. And like I say, he really was my mentor. And there was this one night where it was...
You seem to have had a lot of one nights and one times at Evans.
Because you know what? I was doing a lot of drugs at the time and that's all I could remember. But no. There was this one night where Lenny was also, one of these great guys who would be like, okay, I'm in the store, I'll close up, you guys can go home. And basically sent, like the ready-to-wear department, the entire ready-to-wear department home. And it was just Lenny and I in the store to close. And in those days, we had those loop locks that you had to, make sure. Now, everything on the floor was, was out and it was locked up except for two rolling racks, not rolling racks, what do they call them? The round.
The rounders, yeah.
The rounders. Oh, T-stands, we would have just let them go. This was rounders. So these two guys come in that were, number one, I'm 18 and Lenny is 60 plus. Miami Vice was popular at the time. We weren't Tubbs and Crockett. We looked more like Dumb and Dumber. And we were, because these two guys come in and we're ready to try and sell them something. And they just want each one. We had Blue Fox jackets that were, surrounding and anywhere from, the 3/4 of a skin jacket. Today they make, they use more to make a hat, but, we had those and we had, another rack that had better ones. And these guys,
So most of them didn't warrant the extra expense of having the lock on.
They didn't have the lock. That's not saying.
Weren't it either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're gonna have more in employee pilferage in one code than you will, in losing all of these. However, again, not the brightest of thoughts, but they literally and these were big guys. And Whitfield, you remember, like you can go out of our front door. We were one of the anchors. We were right next to Lord and Taylor. You can go out the front door and be out in the parking lot in 50 yards. And these guys, they weren't carrying footballs. They were carrying 15, 20 coats apiece, but they ran like Walter Payton. And here's Lenny and I, well, actually, Lenny was the one that led the charge. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing? What are you doing? And as I'm doing that, I'm running after, And the two of us literally ran out. There was a car waiting for them. And we literally ran out of the mall, left the store wide open. He was the only one with the keys. We didn't close it. And we're running in the parking lot trying to get, a license plate. It was, like I say, it was exciting times, but it wasn't, it wasn't the smartest of decisions. But what it proved to me was that, people worked, people cared. It wasn't, you didn't think about yourself. You thought about Evans. Certainly that was what Lenny did.
And have your senses after that kind of a situation. You go, I probably shouldn't have done that because I could have.
Well, I could remember Lenny. Lenny used to have, I don't know what it really was, like high blood pressure or something, where he would get nosebleeds sometimes. And you knew Lenny, right?
Yeah.
Lenny was this tall and slanky guy, and he was just probably the most relaxed New Yorker I've ever met in my life. And he'd be working with a customer, and I guess the excitement of sometimes having a customer, especially if it was in the summer, it was like he'd go, uh-oh, and he'd run into the back, and he'd get a nosebleed. And he had it down to a science where he could take a tissue and literally stop the bleeding, He'd sit in his chair like this with his arm up, and he'd go, Zoe collection. And then get up and he'd go out, sometimes with that bloody, with the bloody tissue in his nose. But again, it was all about dedication. It was like you were there to do the job. Nobody ever looked at their watch and said, oh shit, it's 9:00. I gotta go home. It's 9:00. Let's prepare for tomorrow.
And friends, it's time for me to go get another cup. I'm just about empty. So I hope you enjoyed today, spending some time with me, sharing some more tales of the people, places, things, and events, including those practical jokes that Brian Witt seems to have played quite a bit of at the Evans Fur Company between 1929 and its ultimate demise in 1999. Until we meet again next time, I'm Scott. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.
On the next episode of the Companion Podcast, in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2.
He did his job. Everything was tried and true. When it came to budgeting, it was like he had the answer. At the end of the day, he had the answer. And it was built around conservatism.
Always lived beneath his means. We always did.
Yeah.
And so when things got bad for some other people, when the things crashed at Evans, things were not a problem for us.
I went with Harry into a meeting with Freddie, and it was the first time I really met him on a one-to-one basis. And we were sitting there and we were going over reports, and I know you hate reports, but Freddie was looking at the whole company.
Freddie Handel at work was always Freddie Handel at work. Freddie Handel after work was Freddie Handel after work. You know what I mean? He was a great guy. Going to dinner with him was like, first of all, he always made me order the most expensive things on the menu.
We went to one time with Teddy from Grecophilia. We went to a restaurant, there was no prices on the menu. Only he had prices.
Yeah.
So you didn't know if you could order the most expensive thing.
Well, I mean, Jimmy, think about that. You were his date, and I think it was the third date.
He was a hands-on guy, and he was more than numbers person. I mean, he was a numbers guy. He never, and that may have been because of the whole education thing. I don't know, a lack of confidence in his writing. I'm not sure. But yeah, he could lead a meeting.
What I think it was at work, Michelle? I think on the work thing, no matter what position all those old timers had, they all knew every part of the business. And so you were expected to know every part of the business, regardless of whether you were the buyer or the advertiser or the manager in a lease department.
On the next episode of the Companion Podcast, in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2.